What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. The war has been going on for more than 1000 days. It has transformed its nature, strategies and impact on both nations. The conflict has seen shifts in military tactics, changes in public sentiment and a series of internal challenges that have undeniable consequences for the future. People who disliked Putin at first started showing the very first signs of understanding him. Indifferent people got their lives directly affected. And huge pro-war bloggers and Z-propagandists turned against their feeding hands, exposing, unwillingly and sometimes on purpose, some horrible truths about the Russian soldiers along the front lines. For most of them, the reason why would they do it is because they no longer see the objectives of Putin as something they would like to support. They no longer see it taking the same road together. And those military formations they supported in the past with their sole effort and the effort from their communities, once they got used, abandoned and disposed by the Russian war machine, this is what became the point of no return for them. After all, how can you support a cause that considers 90% of those doing the ultimate sacrifice as irreplaceable, meaningless and useless people? So some Z-propagandists and military bloggers decided to take matters in their own hands and started chipping away the foundation of Putin's war from the inside. I don't do much frontline updates anymore, but recently the Donbas region has once again become the focal point of the intense military activity. The Russian army's renewed offensive has led to a series of small, but bigger than usual territorial gains, capturing one tiny settlement after another. If we consider success purely in terms of territorial acquisition and kilometers advanced, the offensive appears to be yielding some results. However, the absence of rapid, deep breakthroughs, which are the signs of blitzkrieg tactics, suggests that a Russian strategy is rooted in slow and grinding attrition rather than swift victory. Putin wants to eventually win in this war, but it does not look like that he wants to win fast. Otherwise he will unleash 10 times the military power of Russia. Instead, he enjoys the process. He milks it as much as possible, at the same time giving himself more time to come up with the perfect ending. Under normal circumstances, if you can call a war normal, the goal of each side is to end it as soon as possible on favorable for them terms. Only a maniac would unnecessarily prolong a conflict for his own gain, whether political or financial. And we already know that Putin does not need that much money anymore. The entire concept of money is foreign for Putin. So the only reason for him to keep the war going is purely political. Very inhumane decisions are taken as if they were decisions what you would want to have for breakfast. It is easier to command lives when you know that you will never see the faces of these people and the horrors you put their families through. That is why the Russian military fight this war one small step at a time. This incremental approach raises several strategic questions. The gradual advances come at the cost of prolonged exposure to combat, leading to sustained casualties and resource depletion. The destruction brought upon these territories results in significant civilian displacement and infrastructural damage, complicating any future efforts at stabilization and reconstruction. The reliance on traditional warfare methods contrasts sharply with modern military doctrines that emphasize speed, technology, and precision. The Russian army's tactics in Donbas seem to reflect a combination of conventional strategies and adaptive measures in response to the Ukrainian defense. And the Ukrainian forces themselves, fortified over years of conflict, have demonstrated resilience, making rapid advances difficult. The Russian population's reaction to the ongoing conflict is complex and varies across different segments of society. Those in distant regions with limited access to the internet and literally 5 channels on their TVs, they are more supportive of Putin's actions. They simply have no other source of information except the state propaganda. Those living in major urban centers like Moscow and St. Petersburg are relatively neutral, or against the war altogether. Obviously there are war supporters, but not as many as somewhere in Siberia, Tuva or Buryatia. Which is also the main reason why the vast majority of Russian soldiers are from these distant regions. For the average citizen, immediate personal and economic concerns take priority over distant battlefronts. Inflation, rising food prices, and increasing mortgage rates are daily challenges that directly affect their livelihoods. The war's continuation adds uncertainty and anxiety, particularly as it enters new phases with unfamiliar geographical contexts and the involvement of foreign entities like the North Korean soldiers. Among the more politically active and nationalistic citizens, there is a noticeable shift in enthusiasm. Initial triumphs were celebrated with passion, and propaganda efforts successfully framed early victories as monumental achievements. However, as the conflict drags on without a clear end in sight, even old-time supporters are beginning to question the narrative. The prolonged siege of cities like Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka or Vuhledar, once considered pivotal, now serve as reminders of unfulfilled promises and the high costs of war. They were promised that taking Bakhmut, for example, would open the road for liberating the rest of Donetsk region with ease. That Russian soldiers will sprint literally across the land and end war within months, maximum by the end of the year. What happened since Bakhmut was captured? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The city name completely disappeared from the Russian media, letting other settlements become the most strategically important cities. Social media and independent reporting have also played significant roles in shaping public opinion. Access to unfiltered information has allowed for a broader understanding of the war's realities, countering official narratives. This has led to increased skepticism and a desire for transparency regarding the war's objectives and progress. The effectiveness of any military campaign is heavily influenced by the integrity and morale of its armed forces. Recent events have highlighted serious internal challenges within the Russian military structure. The leaked conversation involving Alexander Borodai is particularly worth your attention, guys. As a deputy of the State Duma and former leader in eastern Ukraine, his alleged characterization of volunteer soldiers as meaningless people used and expendable resources is concerning at best. Imagine, you are ready to fight Putin's war. According to TV propaganda, you are the hero of the motherland. And then you sit in the trench, knee-deep in cold rain water, and suddenly you hear that one of Putin's henchmen calls you a worthless piece of meat, whose only purpose is to die and stall Ukrainians. So then professional Russian military can take over and initiate the real battle. I'm not even exaggerating. This was the literal quote from Alexander Borodai. It was not an accidental statement either. He continued talking about the meaninglessness of such people and expanding on this topic, seemingly trying to defend his position that Russian volunteer soldiers are useless, both as fighters and as a human resource of the country. I doubt many soldiers would remain dedicated to Putin's war after hearing what the regime really thinks about them. Then we had reports of misconduct among officers, such as involvement in illegal activities and mistreatment of subordinates. The case of Colonel Igor Puzik, we spoke about a couple of times already, accused of harming his own soldiers, has gained significant attention. Just as a reminder, he literally nullified, as he called it, his own soldiers who uncovered his drug trafficking schemes among Russian soldiers in Ukraine. High-profile figures like Vladimir Slavyov and military bloggers have not only reported on this instance, but have also criticized the systemic issues that allow such behavior to persist. The treatment of wounded soldiers further highlight the systemic problems. Allegations of neglect and the refusal to evacuate injured personnel from the front lines are deeply concerning as well. Such actions not only violate the basic principles of humanitarian law, but also damage the trust between soldiers and their commanders. And you would think injured soldiers remain in military hospital until they recover. Well, not quite. There were many cases when they were forced into battle literally on crutches and casts on their limbs. The ongoing conflict and internal challenges within the Russian military have significant implications beyond the immediate theater of war. Regionally, the prolonged instability contributes to economic disruption, refugee flows, and heightened tensions among neighboring countries. The destruction of infrastructure and the humanitarian crisis in affected areas demand increased international attention and assistance. It is very easy to forget that the war still goes on when the front lines are barely moving and no significant battles are concluding. That is why, right now, countries that still support Ukraine feel more like it is their routine duty and responsibility, like they have to show this assistance, otherwise they will be seen as Putin pleasers. This is a huge difference from the beginning of the conflict, when countries sent the support with the intention of beating Putin, defeating him. They genuinely wanted Ukraine to win, but they were afraid to cross Putin's non-existent red lines. So it took them some time to see how far they can push the borders of what is allowed. Globally, the war influences geopolitical dynamics, particularly in relation to NATO, the European Union, and other international bodies. Sanctions and diplomatic pressures have strained Russia's relationships with many nations, affecting global markets and international cooperation on various issues. The internal dissatisfaction and ethic concerns within the Russian military could have long-term consequences for Russia's defense capabilities and its role on the world stage. A military perceived as disregarding the welfare of its personnel and engaging in unethical practices may face challenges in recruitment, international condemnation, and decreased effectiveness, which became evident since the very first weeks of war. Putin did bring an excessive number of troops to be sure that he can achieve a swift victory. But beyond the first several days of rapid advances, Russia has never been able to achieve meaningful progress. They do advance couple kilometers here and there, but that's about it. They were never able to achieve great victories, such as Ukrainians liberating Kharkov, Kherson regions, and then even intruding into Kursk region and entrenching there deep. The distribution of information about these internal issues, especially through uncontrolled channels like social media and independent blogs, undermines the state's ability to control the narrative. When criticisms originate from the pro-war military circles, it signifies a potential shift in allegiance and a cracked facade of unity. The potential unification of previously opposing domestic groups, those supporting and those opposing the war, based on a shared desire to end the conflict, could lead to significant internal political pressure. Finally, even the Z propaganda itself saw the true face of the regime of Putin, which couldn't care less about those willing to sacrifice everything for Putin's ambitions. And if these people, according to the state narrative, are meaningless pieces of myths, we can only assume what the Russian authorities think about regular people who live their peaceful lives. Well, there I had, guys. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Please don't forget about the Black Friday discounts for our merch at RussianDude.com. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.